let me start by asking, what do you think the main highlights of these annual meetings will be here in Nairobi?
There will be a lot of highlights, but I'll give you a few. But just to contextualize the meeting, the annual meetings of the Banking Fund represent the statutory event where the boards of governors make decisions on a number of issues. Now, those decisions will form a majority of the highlights. For example, we anticipate a decision to be made by the Board of Governors on the possible increase of the callable capital of the bank. That is a major highlight. And secondly, a major highlight of the annual meetings is the curtain raiser for the 60th anniversary of the African Development Bank. As you know, this year, the bank will turn 60 on the 10th of September. And the annual meeting presents an opportunity to begin the process of that commemoration. That's a very important highlight. And of course, other highlights will be the topical knowledge events that will deal with the issue of the overall theme on Africa's transformation, the African Development Bank, and the reform of the international financial architecture. And of course, a big highlight of the annual meeting is our governors' dialogue, where governors sit together. It's a whole day event this year, where 81 member countries engage among themselves, engage with management on the direction of the bank. And particularly because this year, during the annual meeting, we will be unveiling the next 10-year strategy of the African Development Bank. And as you can imagine, there's a whole lot of highlights and many more, but those are the major ones that you should be looking forward to.
Now, there will be a number of discussions, and I want to find out what will be the key sessions that everyone would have to look forward to, the knowledge part of the annual meetings outside the key discussions of the bank as a DFI.
We have a whole slew of knowledge events with very strategic, pointedly, crafted areas of discussion. Now, the whole transformation of Africa, for example, there is a session on measuring the green wealth of Africa. And that session talks about to what extent do our natural resources, particularly those of them that aid the environment, add to the wealth of the continent when you want to measure.
Carbon tax, for example.
Decarbonization. Well, the issues of carbon tax, that's as arguable as it may be, but do we get credit at all
carbon credit
for our green wealth? If we have forests that are preserving the world, but you measure our GDP minus them.
DRC, for example.
DRC and a number of other countries. The Congo Basin, for example.
Yes.
Gabon has a forest reserve that we talk about all the time. But when we want to measure the wealth that we have as Africa, those are removed in forming our GDP. Those are crucial issues. The whole issue of energy, just energy transition.
Energy justice.
Exactly. From the point of view of what does Africa need to industrialize, from the point of view of energy. So the debates will be on and on. But the major part of the debates will be that a whole lot of issues will be interrogated, and some could be used for policymakers. Remember, the knowledge events are not necessarily for the bank to implement things that come out of them. But policymakers who are member states should be able to hear and understand the principles, the views that are offered, and how they apply to policy making.
In every jurisdiction, in every country,
Exactly.
in particular for Africa.
The bank is a facilitator, right? The bank is not a sovereign entity that makes policies for countries. It's a facilitator. It's a ground to enable you interrogate these issues and be able to make decisions and policies to implement them.
One of the most important issue is the global financial architecture. Would that be on the table, and how critical would that be to the entire knowledge-based conversation for the week? I'm interested, Mr. Secretary General, in the global financial architecture. How important is this for Africa at this point? Why is it important for the EFDB?
It is important because as the primary and the premier development financial institution on the continent that is tasked with improving the socioeconomic welfare of Africans, it is important because Africa needs more resources. For example, one of the foremost knowledge events is what we call the Presidential High-Level Dialogue, right? And that is made up of those heads of states that are invited to the annual meeting, African heads of state, who will interrogate these issues because they are the ones mostly affected by the skewed nature of the global financial architecture. Of course, there may be all kinds of debate from different angles as to whether or not that issue should be broached by Africans, but Africa feels that it is an area to talk about. The president of the bank, Dr. Adesina, is very passionate about reforming the global financial architecture because the way it is currently structured does not favor developing countries who need more resources than the developed world. For example, his campaign for the regionaling of SDRs to developing banks to enable them leverage 4 times $1 for more development impact is something that is one aspect of that of reform. And there are various other aspects of the reform that will be interrogated. Now, it's going to be a big debate whether Africa will win or not. Geopolitics and the interests of our partners to ensure that Africa gets what it deserves from the point of view of development is arguable. And as you know, countries also maintain their bilateral relations rather than operating from the multilateral dimension. So those challenges remain, but that doesn't stop the movement. That doesn't stop the drive. That doesn't stop the passion that the bank led by the president has in ensuring that whatever role it can play in the transformation or the reform of the international or global or international financial architecture is played.
Would there be some discussions around leadership change at the FDB at this annual meeting?
There's no need for a discussion on leadership change. There's always a calendar on leadership change. Every president of the bank is elected first for a 5-year term and renewable for another 5 years if re-elected. President Adesina was elected in 2015, right? And re-elected unanimously in 2020. And your guess is as good as mine in terms of the calculation. Next year is election year. And as the office responsible for facilitating the election of the president, by July 1, my office will be sending out the expression of interests to all member states of the regional member countries of the bank to nominate, to send in candidates for election. So the game is on from 1st of July this year, just immediately after the annual meeting. So you can imagine. So there's no discussion about it. It's already statutorily enacted and follows through. And we are lucky that we are not a state where you know what happens.
So technically speaking, Mr. Secretary General, this will be the final meeting for Mr. President Adesina.
Well, he may want to see it as his final meeting. I don't believe it is his final meeting because he will still be the president until the next president is elected. And the next meeting, if governors do approve, is scheduled for Abidjan next year. So the president doesn't leave office until the 31st of August, 2025. A new president takes office on the 1st of September of the year of the election. So the president will still have an opportunity to address, the members of the bank. Well, of course, you could say this is a major, but he still has an opportunity to address. It may well be a farewell address, but he still has more than a year to serve as president.